In today's video, I turned the most underrated player on every team into a 99. Now, it's impossible to watch every minute of every game for each NFL team, so I had to get some help, and that's where you guys come in. Thank you to everyone that answered. I asked over on the community tab who the most underrated player on your favorite team is, and I got a lot of answers. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start the video. The Bears had a couple of options that we could have went with. Roquan Smith was definitely one I considered. He's a name I saw in the comments. I tend to agree that he's underrated in real life, but Madden, he's an 89. Mooney was only a 79, okay? But this is a guy that had a 1,000-yard season with iffy at best quarterback play last year, 81 receptions. It was just a dysfunctional organization, especially on the offensive side of the ball for the Bears. So I think he's very underrated, and yeah, now he's a 99. This one was a no-brainer. Like, the Bengals have a great roster, top to bottom, but this is a guy that for some reason is still normal dev in Madden. Obviously, he's an X factor now because we made him a 99. Trey Hendrickson, he was 5th in sacks last year, somehow ended up still normal dev. He was in the low to mid 80s, and no one talks about him in real life. Trey Hendrickson, great player, and now he's a 99. This is an example of a guy that I didn't know about because I don't watch the Bills like that until, the playoffs, where he had 4 touchdowns one game. So I had to look at his stats. This man was actually quietly producing, not just this year, but last year. Okay, back-to-back seasons with 35 plus catches, over 500 yards and 6 touchdowns. Very solid number 3 or 4 wide receiver, whatever you want to call him. Now he might be the number 2 in Buffalo. And yeah, I think he's definitely underrated. Gabe Davis is now a 99 overall. 3 out of our 4 players so far have been wide receivers, and this one comes from the Broncos, man. Tim Patrick had a really good season last year. 53 for 734 and 5 touchdowns. That's back-to-back years with 50 plus receptions, over 700 yards and 5 plus touchdowns, man. Guys quietly produced arguably the best wide receiver 3 in the league. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah was underrated before he even got into the league. He was destined to be in this video, man. Had a really good rookie season. So now the Browns have both him and Myles Garrett, 2 99s on that front 7. Another team that will have 2 99s is the Buccaneers, obviously Brady being one of them. But Mike Evans, his wide receiver, being the other. Now, this is a guy that was already 92 in Madden, but I don't know if that's high enough. And I see him constantly get disrespected when I see people do their top 10 wide receiver rankings. They laugh at the fact or of the notion that he's in the top 10. Do they not understand this is the only player in NFL history to start his career with 8 consecutive seasons with at least 1,000 receiving yards? Jerry Rice never did it. Randy Moss never did it. Terrell Owens never did it, and people are still just disrespecting him. I don't understand it. Hopefully he proves people wrong in this experiment, man. 99 overall now. The Cardinals was another tough one. We struggled to find some names, but Marcus Golden was one I saw, and then I looked at his stats and I was like, yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, he had a phenomenal season, 11 sacks. 2 of his last 3 seasons, he's had 10 plus sacks. Okay, he's proven he can do that. 4 forced fumbles. All right, he only started 5 games, and he did all that, man. He got to the quarterback, was in the backfield getting tackles for loss. So Marcus Golden alongside JJ Watt, they lost Chandler, but this will hopefully help them a lot on that front 7. Now, just hear me out on this one because I know everyone knows Eckler's really good, but apparently Madden is late to the party, because they have him in the mid 80s. Are you kidding me? This dude is consistently taken in the top 5 in fantasy. His stats are absolutely insane. Now, I know he doesn't go off like 1,000 yards and rushing and stuff like that, but when you combine what he does on the ground and through the air, it's insane that he does not get talked about more. Like, this dude should easily be in the low 90s, maybe mid 90s. Austin Eckler now in the high 90s at a 99 overall. Now on the Chiefs, I saw L'Jarius Sneed's name floated around, but I think this was another almost no-brainer. Like, Creed Humphrey earned a spot on PFF's All-Pro team with a current overall PFF grade 92.6, which was more than 6 points higher than any other NFL center. So PFF knows he's good. A lot of people know he's good, except for, I guess, the people that vote for all pros and Pro Bowls, because he was snubbed from both of them. Easily the most underrated player if we go by that metric, and now he's rightfully a 99. Darius the Maniac Leonard. I didn't see too many names from people in the comments about Colts players, but this is one that I remembered because I just know he's really good, and he just got snubbed from the Pro Bowl a few years ago. And yeah, he still consistently does not get talked about enough for my liking, okay? So that's why he is now a 99 overall. Now I'm gonna hurt myself when I talk about this one, okay? Dalton Schultz actually over the past 2 years has better numbers than Dallas Goedert, my team's tight end, who I love dearly. But yeah, I had to put in perspective how underrated he is. 78 receptions, 800 yards, 8 touchdowns last season. I think he's going to step up into an even bigger role now that they lost Amari. They're going to need someone else to, produce. So I think Dalton is very underrated, and now he's a 99. If you're one of those people that instantly started laughing when you saw Tua on the thumbnail, then you're just proving my point, because he gets trashed and talked about in a bad way more than any other quarterback I've seen in a long time. Now, I know he doesn't have the strongest arm, but here's a guy that had a higher passer rating last year than Ryan Tannehill and Lamar Jackson. Now, I know Lamar had a bad season by his standards. He only played 12 games. Tua only played 13. And do not remember how bad the Dolphins O-line has been? Do you not remember that they had one of, if not the worst running game in the league? Now he gets Tyreek, he has Waddle, he has Gesicki. Look out for Tua, man. I think he's extremely underrated because people trash him so much, and he's not that bad. Now, if there's one team I was qualified to know their most underrated player, is obviously the Eagles. I watch every single game. Now, I didn't just go off of that. I looked at your comments too, but somehow nobody said Avonte Maddox. I saw a couple Quez Watkins. That was my second choice. But Avonte has been incredible over the last couple seasons. I can't remember one bad play from him. That's not exaggeration. All I see is him making tackles when we need him to, making pass deflections, getting interceptions. This dude is extremely underrated. One of the best slot cornerbacks in the league. And now he's part of one of the best secondaries in the league. It's crazy to say that as an Eagles fan, but it's true. And now he's a 99. Now, AJ Terrell was the only guy on the Falcons that I saw his name get mentioned in the comments. So on second thought, it made a lot of sense. I mean, this is a guy that was somehow still only star at the end of the season. He was snubbed from the Pro Bowl. Okay, apparently Trevon Diggs getting all the interceptions meant that he's better than AJ Terrell. So just for that reason, we had to put him here because, yeah, he's underrated. The Commanders was another tough one, but I got some help from you guys. Apparently Cole Holcomb is extremely underrated. Here's a guy that had 7 pass deflections last year, 2 interceptions, a touchdown, 2 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, a sack, and 142 combined tackles, which was good enough for top 10 in the league. So yeah, he literally checked every box pretty much. Like, he got involved in almost every way you can on the defensive end. So yeah, I can see why people think he's underrated. This one might be my favorite one. Daniel Brunskill was in the 60s before we made him a 99. Now, he's a right guard for the San Francisco 49ers, and he's one of the few people that have ever gone toe-to-toe with Aaron Donald and won multiple times. Like, the footage that I saw was eye-popping, okay? It was just flabbergasting, all right? It was unbelievable, and they had him in the 60s. I have to repeat that because there's no way that someone in the 60s could be doing that to Aaron Donald. It's impossible. On the Giants, we have Azeez Ojulari. You guys told me about him. Apparently, he was leading all rookies in sacks heading into week number 10. Like, he was having that good of a season. He ended up with 8 sacks on the season, 2 passes deflected, and a forced fumble to go along with 13 QB hits, 49 tackles. So yeah, I'd say he's pretty underrated considering I didn't know much about him. I didn't know he had that good of a season. Now he's a 99. Now, this one was thinking outside the box because a lot of people they saw last year, they were like, oh, the Jaguars are going to be damn near impossible to find anyone that was underrated. Well, I'd argue the complete opposite, man. Almost everyone on that team is underrated after last year because Urban Meyer screwed them badly, okay? One of the biggest culprits was James Robinson. This is a guy that was consensusly viewed as a borderline top 10 running back after his rookie season. And then, he had a down season by his standards. His yards per carry actually went up to 4.7, but his total yardage dropped drastically. Only played 1 less game, but had over 200 less yards. I agree that he is underrated because of the down season by the Jaguars. Now he's a 99. On the Jets, we have a cornerback, Bryce Hall. Now, this is a guy that had an 86.3 PFF tackling grade, which was first in the NFL among cornerbacks who took at least 80% of their team's snaps. So would I like my cornerback to get more than 1 interceptions in 2 years? Maybe. But when you add in the 16 passes deflected, not to mention the 79 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, and 2 QB hits, I would say that, yeah, he's pretty decent, okay? Bryce Hall, very underrated. Now he's up to a 99. Now, if you asked me to name the guys who led the league in interceptions last year, I would have gotten Trevon Diggs pretty easily. JC Jackson, I knew he had a great season. I knew he was in the top 3. I would have had no idea who the third person was if you guys didn't tell me that it was Amani Oruwariye from the Detroit Lions. That's how underrated he is. No one talked about him to the point that we would know consensusly he was top 3 in that category. Now, I know interceptions are not the end-all be-all, but that has to count for something, man. He's underrated, and now he's up to a 99. I'm really hoping he has just a phenomenal season this year because I think he deserves a nickname. Okay, how about the Lizard? Is that too easy or not good enough? Alan Lazard from the Packers, all right? This is a guy that was so underrated, his quarterback didn't even trust him enough to throw it to him in the freaking playoffs, man. 8 touchdowns on a season, 3 straight years with 450 yards receiving. I think he's going to take that next step. The Packers, obviously, they lost Devontae Adams. So, yeah, man, this was not the hardest decision. A lot of people said his name in the comments. I saw Jeremy Chin's name a lot, and rightfully so. This is a guy I knew about, but I didn't know how good he was. But this confirmed it when I saw multiple Panthers fans telling me that Jeremy Chin is the most underrated player on their team. He's up to a 99 now. Brian Burns was another guy we considered. But, yeah, I think the safety made a little bit more sense because he does not have the attributes in Madden compared to Brian Burns. So that's why you went with him. Now on the Patriots, it was between their wide receivers. Okay, we had Jacoby Myers, who is really good. He just did not have the touchdowns. Okay, so the tiebreaker went to Kendrick Bourne. Now you guys said both of their names in the comments, so yeah, it was going to be one of those two, and Bourne ended up edging him out. He's up to a 99 now after putting up 55 receptions, 800 yards, and 5 touchdowns last season. He gets better every single year if you look at his stats. So yeah, I see how he's very underrated. People don't talk about him enough. He's going to be a very nice receiver this year, with Devontae taking some of the pressure away from him. The Raiders now have 299 overall wide receivers. Now, I did consider Derek Carr. I also considered Max Crosby. But my mans in the comment section made a very good point. They just started talking about Hunter Renfrow. Like, we talked about those other names before. But before this season, there was nobody talking about Hunter Renfrow. This is a guy who could be the next Julian Edelman, Danny Amendola, great slot receiver, great safety valve on a Super Bowl contending team. Like, that's how good this man is already, and he does not get talked about enough. He's barely in the 80s in Madden. Like, he's an 82 overall. So yeah, there's no question that this man's underrated. Leave it to the Rams to be the only team that now has 3 99s, almost a fourth. Now, you already peeped it. Tyler Higbee is the guy we went with. Now, the Rams are one of the few teams that I didn't see not one player get commented, so I had to do a little digging of my own. And once I saw Tyler Higbee, I was like, oh, that guy that scored 3 touchdowns on my team in one game, yeah, that guy, okay, yeah, he's pretty freaking underrated. Okay, so now he's up to a 99. Tyus Bowser on the Ravens was the name that got outvoted the most. So you already know he was going to be a lock for this. 7 sacks last year, 4 pass deflections, 2 forced fumbles, along with 15 QB hits, 59 total tackles on a Ravens defense that usually gets credit for having a really good secondary, which they do. Okay, but it's either the secondary or D-line. You don't see too many people talking about their linebackers anymore. Since Ray Lewis left, since Terrell Suggs left, could Tyus Bowser follow that mold of great Ravens linebackers? Who knows? But right now, there's no question he's underrated. Thank God someone else said famous Jameis, so I don't look crazy. Like, Saints fans, you know what you're talking about. I've been saying it for a while. Do people not understand how good of a season Jameis was having? I feel like that 30 for 30 caused him to be looked down on so bad that people underrated him. And then it just confirmed it last year when he had 14 touchdowns, 3 interceptions in 7 games before he got injured without Michael Thomas, with a wobbly or hobbled Alvin Kamara. Like, this dude was not dealing with the peak of his weapons, and he was still on pace to have an MVP type season. People, he was that good. There's no question famous Jameis is underrated. I don't care who else you guys would have said for the Seahawks. I was putting Tyler Lockett at 99 no matter what. This is a guy for a few seasons in a row I've been harping on to be in the 90s. Like, you can go back, read some of the tweets. I remember vividly when they lost the game to Arizona back in week 6, where he had 15 for 200 and 3 touchdowns, and they bumped him up 1 overall to an 89. They're so petty. I don't know what Lockett did. Did he like look at one of the people's wives at EA the wrong way? Why won't they give him a 90 overall? Well, you know what? Now he's a 99, so eat my ass. Multiple Steelers fans told me that Ahkello Witherspoon was a dog that does not get the recognition he deserves. Now, I'll be honest, since Joe Hayden left, I thought the Steelers secondary, besides Minka and maybe Edmonds, was just not very good. So maybe that's why. They're so underrated that you don't think they're good. You know what I'm saying? So Ahkello Witherspoon, I will take your word for it And I agree that he's underrated. Now, Davis Mills won this one almost by default. I didn't see too many names from the Texans. I know Brandon Cooks is extremely underrated, always has been, but I feel like that's just too easy. So we went with someone else to help them out a little bit. You know, if you're a Texas fan, how can you be mad at this? Now you have a 99 overall quarterback. Davis Mills, as a rookie, did better than you would think. Christian Fulton, very promising young cornerback from the Titans. That's who we went with as the most underrated player. Appreciate the Titans fans with the lob. I always thought he looked promising, but I admittedly don't watch their games, so I had to get confirmation, and I guess that's all the confirmation I needed that he is underrated. And then finally, KJ Osborne, someone who's only a 75 Madden, but he had 4 game-winning touchdowns in the last season. I guess 2 of which are in overtime. I need someone in y'all to fact check that because I saw that comment, you know, under the post. But I do remember at least one of them. All right, and because they already have Jefferson, because they already have Thielen, this is someone who does not get talked about enough. All right, so that alone, and then you look at his stats. He had back-to-back really good seasons for a wide receiver 3. Yeah, there's no question that KJ Osborne is underrated. So the NFL is looking a little bit different with all of these 99s, man. Which of these teams is going to benefit the most from their most underrated player finally getting the recognition that they deserve? In the AFC, it was the Browns, Titans, Bills, Ravens, Chiefs, Raiders, and Colts. In the NFC, the Commanders take the 1 seed, the Cardinals, Eagles, Falcons, Bucks, Niners, and Packers with an under 500 record end up winning the NFC North. Mooney had a 1,000-yard season. Hendrickson ended up with 12.5 sacks. Gabe Davis had a 1,000-yard season to lead his team. 6 touchdowns to go along with it. Tim Patrick led his team 941 yards receiving, 5 touchdowns. Thought he would have did a little bit better, especially with Russell Wilson throwing him the rock. JOK led his team in tackling. Mike Evans continued his streak of 1,000-yard receiving seasons. They had 3 on the Buccaneers. Jesus. Marcus Golden ended up with 21.5 sacks to lead the Cardinals. Eckler had 38 for 362 and 2 touchdowns through the air, but he also had 12 touchdowns to go along with 1,274 rushing yards. Creed Humphrey only allowed 3 sacks on the 1,200 downs played. Darius Leonard led his team in tackling. He also had 3 interceptions. Dalton Schultz had 727 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns. Tua had over 4,000 yards, 31 touchdowns, 15 interceptions is a little surprising. Avonte Maddox tied for the most pass deflections on the Eagles. He also had an interception and a tackle for loss. AJ Terrell had 2 interceptions, was 4th on his team in tackling. Cole Hogan was 2nd on his team in tackling. He also had 4 sacks and an interception. He did it all. If only Brunskill could have played Aaron Donald every single game, man. 7 sacks given up on 1,199 downs played. Azeez Ojulari led his team in sacks with 8. Also had 10 tackles for loss. James Robinson bounced back nicely. 1,700 yards, 20 touchdowns on the ground, not to mention 47 for 417 and 3 touchdowns through the air. He's 100% in the MVP conversation. Bryce Hall continued to tackle really well, man. He was 2nd on the team in that category. Had 4 interceptions as well. Amani led his team in interceptions. Also had half of a sack and a tackle for a loss. Lazard had 1,400 yards, 14 touchdowns. Chin was 3rd on his team in interceptions with 2. Had half a sack, had a tackle for loss. Kendrick Bourne, over 1,000 yards on the season, 6 touchdowns to go with it. Hunter Renfrow, 1,300 yards, 7 touchdowns to lead his team. Higbee did pretty well. He had 10 more catches than Cooper Kupp, 3 touchdowns as well. Tyus Bowser led his team with 13 tackles for loss, 17 sacks. Famous Jameis had himself a season, 4,000 yards, 34 touchdowns, only 12 interceptions. Lockett had 1,000 yards, man, 75 receptions, 6 touchdowns. Ahkello Witherspoon had the 2nd most pass deflections on his team. He also had an interception. Davis Mills, another guy who had a 4,000 yard season. Now, he threw a little bit too many interceptions, but still, not that bad. Christian Fulton with 6 interceptions to lead his team by far. What a season. And then finally, KJ Osborne led the Vikings in receiving yards, receptions, and receiving touchdowns. The MVP goes to Nick Chubb from the Browns. The highest finish for any player we upgraded to a 99 was 4th by James Robinson, and it ends up being the Browns versus the Buccaneers in the Super Bowl. The Browns, we upgraded JLK. The Bucks, remember, it was Mike Evans. This could be the last drive of the game. Fournette getting the carry. They're firmly in field goal range. Here it is. The Bucks are the winners of the Super Bowl in this experiment. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new around here. Let me know any other ideas you have for me, and I'll see you on the next one.